Thank y'all so much for being here. I really appreciate it a lot. Some of you I know came a very long way. I'm going to read chapter 2. As I always tell people, I don't start with chapter 1 because this young deputy has just lost her husband, and chapter 1 is very short and it's kind of sad. So I want to get into the part where she takes off with the mystery. So chapter 2. What do you want me to do, Barney? I pulled on a pair of latex gloves and swallowed the foul taste in my mouth. I was willing to do almost anything if I didn't have to look at the body again. I had already thrown up once. Norma Babe was lying in a pool of blood in the middle of her filthy kitchen, in a house that was incredibly hot. Too hot for working or moving, too hot even for being dead. Would you sweep? Barney was lifting fingerprints from the area around the sink and didn't look up. It looks like trash, but something useful might turn up. The floor hadn't been swept or mopped in 6 months at least. The dingy tiles were littered with bits of paper, spilled food that dried where it fell, and a few pieces of broken toys. An armless Shrek, a hairless naked Barbie, a minuscule parts from matchbox trucks and cars. I set the sad toys on a far corner of the counter. They didn't seem pertinent to the murder, only proof that children lived there. I lifted a torn, partially crumpled photograph of a young Latino off the floor. His hair was black and shiny, and he had a been at the beach all summer complexion. The smile on his lips was seductive. This man knew he was a knockout, but his eyes were kind and somehow sad in spite of his movie star looks. The eyes, his best asset, were like gazing into an abyss full of stars. What are you looking at, Ricos? I matched the photo at the tear and held it in front of Barney. Do you know this man? He stood, slowly straightening his 6.5-foot frame from a crouching position, swiped his face across his shirt sleeve, and frowned at the handsome man. He's nice looking, but I've never seen him before. You don't know him? I've never seen him either. He could be your brother. I don't have a brother. Barney sighed. I'm just saying he looks like you. Excuse me. He's Mexican, I'm half Mexican. Other than that, I don't see a resemblance. You're a hard-headed pain in the butt. What's your point? Skip it. Maybe Norma and another woman were fighting with him. Or Norma was having an affair with him and he got sick of her and stabbed her, I suggested. You really think a woman as unattractive as Norma could get a good-looking man like that even once? Good point. I found a broom and dustpan in a closet. I had to fight a big gray spider for them, but I got to work, meticulously sweeping from the line of blood outward. I tried not to look at the dead woman. She had been stabbed in the heart, and a big bloody stain had spread across her chest. The table had been shoved from the center of the room, where Norma now lay, to the far wall. One trap chair had skidded along with it, and 4 other chairs were toppled and lay askew, dead in battle. Utensils, pots and pans were scattered, maybe thrown in a fight, an attack, or in self-defense. Knowing Norma, I'd have guessed she started it, but guessing is unacceptable in crime scene investigation. I had hated Norma Bates alive, but in death she was somehow pitiful. What a bitch she had been. Now she was a dead bitch, but since I was supposed to show respect for the victim, I kept my mouth shut. That wasn't hard since Barney wasn't saying much. He was sweating profusely and concentrating on lifting prints. His uniform looked like he had taken a shower in it. Occasionally he'd straighten up, wipe his face, and curse. On another day at a different scene, I might have laughed out loud, but this one wasn't funny. The whole thing reminded me of Kevin and the bull and the blood stain on his chest, the chest where I loved to lay my head. I took a trembling breath of air that was stifling and smelled of stale blood and filth. The Bates family lived off the grid and had solar power, but not enough to run anything to cool the place. There was only an oscillating fan that half-heartedly pushed against the hot air. Once the first pile of debris was swept up, I set the dustpan on the counter to examine the trash, using the pin from my pocket to move things around. There was dried macaroni, a few hairs, dust balls, scraps of paper, the crumpled photograph, some dried peas, and 1 earring. It was a gold hoop with a tiny heart in the center, and I'd seen it before and recently on my mother. My heart went into my throat. My mother did this? There's no way my mother could have done it. I lifted the hoop with the pin and studied it. I was sure it was hers and it had been the debris closest to the body. Should I leave it and let it become part of the evidence? Yes, of course, that's exactly what I should do. But I could take it and match it for certain to the other one, if I could find the other one. To take it would be tampering with evidence in a murder investigation, and maybe it wasn't even hers, except I knew it was. Sheriff Ben would flip if he ever found out I took it. I slipped it into my pocket, then took it out and started to put it back with the other trash in the dustpan. I glanced around like a shoplifter to see what Barney was doing, but he wasn't watching me. I slipped the earring back into my pocket. I wanted to grill Mom myself, or that's what I told my conscience. Sweat poured off me as I swept up the rest of the kitchen. Afterward, I stepped outside into the shade of a lean-to back porch. It wasn't much cooler, but the air smelled better and breathing was easier. I sighed and comforted myself with breathtaking views in all directions. Scenery that never failed me, even when everything else did. Hazy mountains with bare cliff faces of red-brown rock, boulder-strewn hills that appear to be gently rolling, but are anything but gentle. In the Big Bend of Texas, nothing is as it appears. Bizarre shapes and show-off colors materialize as light floods the landscape. Things gleam for a while, then darken, change shape, move, and eventually disappear as the sun cuts its path across the sky. By the time darkness settles, you wonder if the whole scene wasn't just a trick of your imagination. Entire mountains come and go as if by magic, or hang suspended above the desert. Distances are deceiving. Is that strange rock formation 15 miles away or 50? There are not many trees or shrubs to get in the way of the vistas, and on a clear day it's possible to see 100 miles into Mexico. And the senses lie. From the vantage point of the mountains, the desert looks like a desolate moonscape. From the desert, the mountains seem bare. Neither thing is true. I looked around the back porch and then the rocky ground beside it. When that yielded nothing, I moved to the front of the house. There was a discarded cigarette butt and a crumpled, empty pack of Rojos brand manufactured in Mexico. Maybe it meant nothing and could have gotten there 100 ways, but I put it into an evidence bag anyway. The cloud of dust coming my way was most likely my boss, Sheriff Ben Duncan, and I told myself to go back inside, but just couldn't. He parked his Ford on the side of the road by the house and jumped down. When he noticed me watching, he smiled and waved. I hurried towards him. "How's it going, Deputy Ricos?" He extended his hand and we exchanged hellos as if there wasn't a dead body melting into the floor. Then he began to walk towards the house. I followed because it would have been wrong to stand by the road the rest of the day. Sheriff Duncan is 6 feet tall. He's old, 60-something, yet doesn't seem old. He has broad shoulders and stands erect, which makes him seem younger, but he has an older man's tolerant attitude. His thick hair is wavy and completely white. He's been a lawman since he was 20 years old. I wonder if it wasn't his job more than age that turned his hair. I could almost feel mine going white when I thought of the close, hot smell of the blood in that dirty little kitchen. When we got to the door, Sheriff Duncan paused, removed his hat, took out a handkerchief and wiped his brow. "Hot as hell," he said, as he replaced the hat. "Is Barney in here?" "Yes, sir. He's still fingerprinting. I just stepped out for some fresh air." "It's hard, isn't it, Margarita?" "Yes, sir, especially when it's someone you know, dying violently like that." She was a mom, too. I knew Norma's children would suffer because of her untimely death, and I felt sorry for them. Although I had wished death on Norma many times, seeing it happen to her was another thing. That's all I'm going to read for right now. I just gave the rest of my voice. Would anybody like to ask a question?
I have a question. Knowing that you've lived and worked in Southwest or Big Bend all those years, so I know where your visions are coming from on the scenery. The question I've wanted after reading through it is, do you have a contact in the police department that helps you with terminology and protocol on things like that?
Well, I do now. But when I wrote this book, I made some mistakes because I don't think they're real glaring, but when the sheriff read the book, he pointed them out to me.
Oh.
But I had talked to one of the deputies that worked in South County for many years, and that was my only source. I don't know why I didn't think to go to the sheriff, but I didn't, and so I just went to him not too long ago. And I think I have a much better source now.
Cool.
But anyway, this deputy told me about protocol and that the Texas Rangers are often called to a murder in a small town because they have the expertise, and usually the small sheriff's departments just don't have it. So, yeah.
That's wonderful.
Any other questions? Yes?
Is this your first book?
This was my first one, yes.
Okay.
This is the first of a series
Oh,
about a
okay.
deputy that's stationed down in Terlingua, Texas, right on the edge of Texas. And this is the one that won the award, which is why I'm reading from it. And then there's two that follow this. Any other questions?
How many do you have so far in the can here? Deputy
Of this
Rico's.
series,
Deputy Rico's.
there's 12.
Wow.
And the publisher that I've just signed with is going to bring out the fourth one probably in November. And it's called Border Ghosts.
Border Ghosts.
Border Ghosts.
Where do you get your ideas for your main characters? Do they come from real people or are they composites?
Well, when I first started writing, I was using my daughter as the guide for Deputy Rico's. And as I was trying to write in her voice, and I couldn't. I realized after I wrote 3 novels in her voice, and I thought, you know what, you can't do this. I can't be my daughter. But the deputy is still fashioned after my daughter. She's based on her, but loosely now because I've changed her quite a bit. So she's morphed into her own person, you know. Yes, ma'am.
So your daughter, is she the one that looks out into the mountains and reads all of that to get recovered from whatever the day is going on? Is she living out somewhere where that she gets to see, you know what I mean?
Well, my daughter was born and raised in Terlingua, so
Okay.
all her life she was looking at this scenery. Does she appreciate it as much as I do? I don't know. I think so, because right now she's in California. And she says, Mom, you know, she called me the other night, she said, Mom, I really miss you. And I said, oh, I miss you too. She said, well, you know, also, I really miss the mountains. And she's in mountains, but she says they're not the same mountains. I said, no, that's true, they're different
Well,
mountains.
I'm just thinking about it at her office, because I read the 3 books, you know, and so where her office and when she looks out to get comfort and, you know, that sort of thing.
That part's probably more me than my daughter.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. She's probably a third my daughter, a third me, and a third imaginary person.
Good imaginary.
Thank you.
Who does the covers?
My daughter. My daughter's name also is Margarita. So she's Margarita Garcia. So that is why I named my deputy that. And she's very proud of that. You know, I said, does that not embarrass you? She said, oh, no, Mom. She says, it doesn't embarrass me at all. I'm very happy that you did that. So. She does all my covers, and they're all on this table over here if you'd like to look at them.
And they're all of the food.
Yeah, they all have Big Bend scenery. This has a mountain this is supposed to be Cimarron Mountain, the mountain that she talks about all the time. So, and, oops. There's the, I don't know if y'all can see it or not. So, and it's also her photograph, so she's pretty good. She's learning, same as me, she's learning. There she goes.
You know, I had to laugh. Sorry, I had to laugh. I first talked to you months ago at a book club in Terlingua.
Right.
And I asked you, I said, I recognize some of these folks. And you said, oh, no, they're fictitious.
They are.
They're fiction. Well, I recognize.
Stop
So
it.
it's funny to see, I mean, it's not dead on, like you said, but it's funny to see before I read your books, I knew these folks. And then I read your books, and then I go, oh, I recognize that, or I recognize it, or bits or pieces, or composites, or whatever. But it's interesting to see that process come into a book, to me anyway.
Yeah, well, I have to base the characters on something. And I do take them, a great deal of them are from my imagination. But, you know, I'm bound to put some people from down south in there. However, when I say down south, I mean Terlingua, Texas, South Brewster County, for those of you who don't know that. And, you know, the people that are down there are so interesting, and they all have their little quirks, like everybody everywhere, I guess. And so I just kind of make a composite of them, like when I talk about the old guy that sits on the porch all the time. There's at least 10 old guys down there that sit on the porch all the time.
Right.
So that particular man is just a composite of all those characters. You know, he talks all the time and thinks he knows everything, and those are those guys, you know.
Yeah.
I don't think they recognize themselves, though. I hope. You know, and of course, the first thing Sheriff Duncan wanted to know was, Sheriff Duncan, Sheriff Dodson, who's our sheriff. He said, "Well, is this me?" I said, "He's in his 60s. Are you in your 60s?" "No." "Do you have white hair?" "No." I said, "Well, it's not about you, but it really is." I didn't realize how much it was about him until he started talking to me about his feelings about law enforcement and his position, and I thought, oh my goodness, I've written him. I didn't even know it, you know. So that worked out.
And it's sort of serendipity too, that you talk about Barney being 6.5 feet tall and very intimidating, huge deputy. Well, that's the deputy down there.
I know,
But you didn't know.
I didn't know he was going to be down there because he wasn't down there, you know.
Yeah. So our deputy in South County now, who's the counterpart that she reads, or has written about, is this 6.5 foot tall guy that you would want to mess with. His name is
No.
Patrick. Yeah.
I know, I think that's kind of funny
Isn't that
that
interesting?
he ended up there.
Yeah.
I want to ask about an adventure for Deputy Rico's, because of course I know about your rafting adventures and company background. I'd love to see Deputy Rico's on a real rafting adventure. Is that maybe one of the plot lines in the future?
Yes, it might be. Yeah, I owned and operated Big Bend River Tours out of Lajitas for 15 years. So yes, it would seem like a logical thing for me to write about that. But I have such mixed feelings about it.
Oh,
I
wonderful.
love the river and I had fabulous adventures, but
Because you did just a little.
I was the owner of the company, so that puts you in
Yeah.
I had to manage the guides, and river guides are just almost unmanageable. They're wonderful, they're great on the river with people, you can trust them, they tell fabulous stories. I guess I should write a book about their stories, because whoa. But anyway, I should be writing about that, and I will eventually.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. I'll take her on an excitement on the river.
Yeah. The river guy.
Yeah, with the river guide. Oh, you're bad.
Beth, you might want to mention too that you do a weekly, or is it weekly? Or
It's weekly, yeah.
Weekly for the Avalanche?
I write a weekly column in my local newspaper, which is the Alpine Avalanche. I live in Alpine, Texas, which is a tiny little place. Some of you may know it. But I write a weekly column with them. So they help me promote my books, and I help them by writing the columns.
It's always interesting, I think.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
They appreciate it. They say that my column is really popular. And then when they don't run it, that people call them and tell them, you know. So that's nice.
Yes.
So.
Any more questions? That's it. Well, thank you, Beth. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
In a few minutes, Howard Webb will be reading from his book.